Welcome to Life in DNA with Amanda Renee. Today we're going to dive into the family mystery that I have been working to solve. Let's get started. Hello everyone. I am going to talk about one of my favorite topics to talk about today, and that is the family mystery that I have been working for over a year and a half now to try and solve. I'll just let you know I have it, I would say 95% solved at this point. But we're going to go all the way back to the beginning and talk about how I even learned about this mystery and what exactly happened to this person. And in a future episode, I will discuss how I went about figuring it out. So, it's actually not my family's mystery. It's my husband's. I remember when we were first together, hearing little snippets. I think the first time I really heard about this was his grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. And his grandma's two sisters had come to visit. It was the one and only time I've met them. I am hoping to get to talk to them again soon, because I want to let them know what I've discovered. But I remember hearing a little bit about it then, but at that point, my daughter was very little. I was a new mother, exhausted, and didn't have time to do anything with Ancestry at that point. And then later, after she passed, we got to talk to his grandparents are so funny. I love them so much. They've both passed now, and I hate that he was very close to them. But they were very sweet people. But it was funny because when you got in a room with both of them, they both wanted to talk to you at the same time, and you didn't know who to try and listen to more or look at, and the other one, if they saw you looking at the other one too long, would get your attention. So we didn't ever get to find out a whole lot of information while his grandma was still living. But when she passed and we would talk to his grandpa, he would tell us a little bit about the story, what he knew of it. And all they knew was that his grandmother's father was left on a train in a basket as a baby. That's all they knew. And that he'd been adopted. And so I was intrigued, even back then, very intrigued by the story. And then Ancestry DNA, 23andMe, all of the DNA kits started becoming more mainstream, more affordable. And finally, I decided my husband and I needed to do our DNA. My husband's aunt had bought a kit for his grandpa to do, but he never ended up doing it, unfortunately, because that would have been extremely helpful to have. Well, I guess his wouldn't have helped me solve the mystery, but it would have helped me solve other mysteries in the family. So my husband and I got each other DNA kits for Christmas and sent them off. We're both, knowing our mothers the way we do, we're both like very relieved when we discovered, okay, our dads are really our dads. We are who we think we are. I read so many stories on a Facebook page that I'm part of where, daily multiple people do these DNA kits. Sometimes because they have an inkling that something isn't right in their family, and then other times it's simply just for fun, and then, oh, nope, my dad wasn't who I thought he was. So we're relieved. Our dads are our dads. And I was going to get started figuring out this mystery. And as I did, I decided to research his great-grandpa and found newspaper articles. And honestly, those are what have helped me the most, more than anything. The information in these helped me so much. And I'll tell you some of the things that I found in it. Let's see. There was... No, that's not the article. Okay. One of the ones I found, the title of it was Abandoned at Poplar Bluff, Missouri, Iron Mountain Train. And it said, brown-eyed baby boy dressed in pretty white frock, wrapped in a dainty flannel cloak, and carefully placed in a large market basket. Had a note from his mother asking passengers to see that the infant arrived safely in St. Louis and was placed in an orphan's home. Passengers remember a neatly dressed woman wearing several diamonds, pretty, and about 25 years old. Supposedly boarded at Hot Springs and got off at Poplar Bluff. So, I had a lot of information right there to work with. And, I don't know, the more I read about this, the more intrigued I was. One, the baby was dressed nice. The mother was dressed nice and wearing diamonds, wearing jewelry. And that's not the only article that said that. So, I will tell you later how I discovered that actually helped me narrow down who I think the mother is. Just that little bit of information. So it didn't appear that, she was giving this baby up because she was not well off enough. I figure it probably had to do more with the stigma of unwed mother. And then there was another article. There was several articles written about this one particular thing. Another article had the actual contents of the note. And the note was quoted as saying, "Will someone be kind enough to see this baby through to St. Louis and place it in the orphan's home and oblige a poor mother? His name is Clarence Albert." And I knew when I read that, okay, so poor mother, obviously she wasn't monetarily poor, right? She wasn't financially poor. I think it was poor mother, like she did not know what to do. Maybe scared of her position in society or her prospects for a future husband. Who knows at this point? But the name that she named him Clarence Albert. And I have done digging, and this is before Missouri required records of births. So I've gone looking. There is no birth record. In the states that he could have possibly been born in, there was no record of his birth. And, at least that I could find. I knew the name Clarence Albert had to mean something. And, again, that tidbit of information later was kind of the nail in the coffin, so to speak, to help me know I had the right mother, or at least have the right two sisters. Let's see. Then I found a newspaper article from the great-grandpa himself. He was a young man now, grown. They had just had their first son, and he wanted to know who he really was, which broke my heart. It had a picture of him next to the article. Oh, it just broke my heart. And it was written in 1932. And it gave the name of the train. His birth was about September 25th, 1906. The doctor said the baby was about 5 days old, making his birthday September 20th, 1906. He was placed in the Bethesda home in St. Louis. They named him. So I don't know if they didn't see the note, if the note went with the police. The police records had been in a fire at some point, so there are no police records to look at. So I'm wondering if the note went with them, because the Bethesda home, they named the baby Whitcomb Brooks. And he was first adopted by Gustav Schuppmann. He was a German couple when he was 3 years old. So I believe they changed his name to Walter at that point. Now, they had him until he was 11. And I've been in contact with one of this man's distant relatives, and I'm hoping to get to talk to someone that actually met Walter and knew Walter. If I could ever get the courage to make the phone call. I'm hoping since he's older, he will still actually talk to someone on the phone that isn't a number that he recognizes. But they gave me his phone number because I was just interested to know if he knew why they took him back. Because when he was about 11, they took him back to the foundling home. And just based off of census records, they had been married about 10 years without having children. I think by the time they adopted him, they had been married like 7 years at that time with no children. And I think that they had thought, well, then they weren't capable of having kids. And so they adopted Walter. And then a few years later, they started having kids, and they had multiple children. And then you're talking early 1900s. Finances weren't great for everyone at that time. And they took him back. At least that's my theory. Until I talk to someone in the family that says otherwise. That is what I've assumed. Okay, and then the article went on to say that at 11, he was released by the German family and then adopted by someone named Harry Hellman. And they changed his name to, Walter Hellman, which is the name he had for the rest of his life. And I've had a hard time trying to nail down exactly which. That name seems to be fairly common. That surname is fairly common in that area, and so there are a few Harry Hellmans, and I've had trouble tracking down exactly which one, because I'm very interested in all of Walter's story. I'd like to know what his childhood was like, what he was like, because he passed, way before I came into the family. The little bit that I've gotten from my husband's dad and aunt, they remember him being kind, but they didn't see him very often. Their dad was in the Air Force, and so they were moved away from that family. So in the article, Walter, he gave his address and was hoping that someone from the train, one of the passengers on the train, would read the article and remember and be able to give him maybe more information on his mom. And I'm curious to talk to my husband's great aunts to see if they know whether he got any response to any of that, because as far as I know, I don't think he did, but I would be curious to see if anyone reached out. He also put a plea in the article that if his mother had accidentally left him on the train, which breaks my heart that he even still had that hope after everything, that he still had the hope that his mom had accidentally left him and just lost him, and wanted, wanted him back, or wanted to get to know him. I mean, he was an adult, but wanted to get to know him. This was his address, and he wanted a relationship if that was possible. Wanted to know who he was. He stated in there, he'd had 3 different names his whole life. He would like to know what his actual name was. And when I read that, I was more determined than ever. Like, okay, I'm going to give him, even though he isn't here to accept it. He's in heaven and already knows it now, I'm sure. But I wanted to just figure that out and discover that and let it be known for the rest of the family, what his actual name was. And I do know what that was. So I was just fascinated by that story. When I was doing all of the digging, trying to find the newspaper articles, I was amazed at how many stories there were of babies being left on trains. And what was funny to me was, in that instance, multiple passengers commented on all the jewelry that this woman was wearing and how nicely she was dressed. And, you normally think of, someone having to give up their baby. They just didn't have the money to take care of it. But, back then, I think the stigma of an unwed mother for someone that in a family that had more money or had some kind of position in society, the stigma would have honestly probably been harder on her. And, we have no idea the story of how she became pregnant. That's always going to remain a mystery because the people involved have passed, if they would have even talked about it to begin with. And I've just always been curious, was it a passionate love affair? Was it something a little more nefarious? I don't want to assume that, especially given, I'm trying to be in contact with some of the families, and I've actually been in contact with some of the father's family, and they said that honestly it didn't really surprise them that he was a part of something like that. And I'm hoping to get to meet one of those relatives and see some pictures. I would love to see pictures of what his parents looked like. But apparently this was a thing, leaving babies on trains. I had written notes. I have a notebook just full of notes of all my research for the different aspects of all of this. Yeah, and it's all very early 1900s, 1901. Baby girl left near Union Station. February 1905, baby girl, brown eyes, left on a seat in the women's waiting room at Union Station. September 1905, baby left with 2 women at Union Station. The mom was a brunette, dressed nice, in a fitted white dress and hat. September 1906, that's Walter. Let's see, June 1906, St. Louis, a woman handed a baby. July 1903, St. Louis, baby left by a well-connected woman and returned to her. So there was an instance of a baby that actually did get lost, accidentally left, and then reunited with their mother. But there was only one in all of that I read that was like that. All the rest of them, there were some, the mom would go up to some motherly looking women and say, "Oh, I need to use the restroom real fast. Can you hold my baby, please?" And then she'd take off. And then others, like they would just sit the baby down and take off. And I've always wondered, just trying to put myself into her position, but that's, as a mom, that is really, really hard for me. According to what is written in the articles, she got on with the baby in the basket because no one ever saw a baby. So how she kept that baby quiet, I don't know, because one of my kids screamed her head off, and the other one, he'd be quiet some, but stuffed in a basket, I don't know. I mean, I guess he was only a few days old, but she gets on the train with the basket. She stays overnight in a sleeper car because she got on at Little Rock, Arkansas, and she left at Poplar Bluff, Missouri. So she stayed overnight in a sleeper car with her baby, knowing she was abandoning him the next morning. Like, what was going through her mind? Was she, snuggling the baby and telling him sweet things and kissing him goodbye? Or was she cold and trying not to get attached and just worried about keeping him quiet until she left him? I really wish I could know what went through her mind at that point. It fascinates me because, I don't know, as a mom, I can't imagine having to do that. And then to feel so desperate as to put your child in the care of a foundling home. I mean, the conditions in those places at that time couldn't have been really great. Just to be that desperate to put your baby in that position, it breaks my heart. For him and for her, if it was a hard decision, which you would assume it would be. And she was, once I discovered who it was, she was actually lived in Missouri. So, she was from Missouri, not necessarily St. Louis, but not terribly far from there. And so her coming from Little Rock, Arkansas makes me wonder if she spent her later pregnancy time down there visiting friends or family. I've been trying to discover if there's any kind of family connection down there. Of course, it could have been a friend that she went to stay with. If she was 25, like the people assumed that she was, and the lady that I've discovered that I think it was, that would have been correct. She would have been about that age. She may have just moved down there temporarily to get away from anybody that knew her. So she was from Missouri and ended up in Arkansas somehow to have the baby. Just the whole mystery around it, the whole story, it's so fascinating to me, and I am excited to start letting you know in the future episodes kind of my little discoveries. I made some big discoveries along the way, and how the DNA, different newspaper articles, DNA matches, how all of the dots just connected. And finally, after I had almost given up being able to find who his parents were, finally connected the dots. So I am looking forward to telling you all about that in future episodes. So thank you for joining me at Life in DNA with Amanda Renee today. I hope you enjoyed the story of Walter's mystery, and I look forward to walking through how I discovered who his real parents were. We will discuss that next week. We'll get into that a little more. Follow me on Instagram or email me with Amanda at lifeanddna.com. And just let me know if you have any family mysteries you're working on or ones that you've solved. I am always excited to hear about things like this. I love doing this. And I will see you next time.